Okay.
Really upset that I muted it.
But you'll be heard through mine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, we're letting people in now.
Now I might be able to, um, probably can't.
All right. Can people on Zoom hear me? Yep.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So yeah, so we should be able to do this. Um, Mark set up the Mark set this up uh, on the TV here in the hallway, so I think we should be okay. Yeah, I'm gonna stop my video because you can see me on this. So there we go. I mean, but yeah, I mean, but feel free to. I mean, it's seeing me is not the big thing.
No, it's the glare.
It's a glare. Okay. All right. All right. So maybe I'll do it this way. Okay. All right. So if we're good,
Well, you can turn you on and then you'll just be another person.
that's true. That's true.
That's what I would do.
Okay, but the people on Zoom can hear me, right?
Yes.
And
Yes. Yes.
okay, and we can. All right. So this works. I think this works. Great. Thank you, Mark.
Good one.
Okay. So good morning.
Good morning.
Hope everybody's doing okay. And Moadim L'Simcha, which is a common greeting given during Sukkot after the first couple of days. We are in the intermediate days of Sukkot. And during these intermediate days, what we're supposed to do is not necessarily say the phrase Chag Sameach. Chag Sameach literally meaning happy holiday, because the intermediate days of Sukkot, they're part of the holiday, but they're not as intensive, meaning work is allowed to be done on those days. So what it means is that so Moadim L'Simcha, I guess sort of a rough translation of that is may these more ordinary days be happy. Something like that. Happy days in that sort of thing without the whole theme song from the 50s. So that's what Moadim L'Simcha essentially means. So that's something that we typically say during this time. Now, what I also want to mention is I know there was a question last time about wicks, right? About how many
Yes.
wicks in a Havdalah candle. So I did some research on wicks, and so I want to, or just a little bit. So I want to show you what I mean by wick, by what a wick is. See, you got John Wick.
That's my favorite man.
Oh,
You didn't okay, all right. So okay, that's not what we're talking about when we're talking about a
That's
wick.
terrible.
Here's what I really mean. Okay. So this is what I mean by a multi-wicked candle.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So in other words, you see that it's been braided.
Braided?
Braided, like like a braid, like you sort of like
Oh
you
yeah.
one on
Like
top of the
hair.
other. And then you have sorry?
Like holly.
Yeah, like we do for challah, like challah bread
Except
is
for it's open-ended rather than close-ended.
right. And then the idea is that what's sticking out are those or the substance that allows that you can light on fire. And the idea is that by lighting this candle that has multiple wicks, and then it winds up forming into one flame. that's what we mean by this. Does that help clarify?
Yes, thank you so much.
No
I thought
problem.
I would light like multiple candles and name one by one for days. So but it is one candle and multiple weeks.
Right.
So every week, let's say there is 7 weeks in one candle. So is every week is for another day in a week?
A lot of Havdalah candles are done in that fashion where they'll have like a lot of Havdalah candles will have, let's say, 6 wicks, referring to the 6 days of the week that are not Shabbat. That's a typical thing. Um, it doesn't have to be 6, right? It doesn't have to be that number. You could have, I mean, I've seen large Havdalah candles that have had, probably, more than a dozen wicks. I've seen others that where you just have 2. But the idea is to have more than one. That's what you're aiming for. So anyway, so hopefully that's a little bit of that's a good
I'm
thought.
gonna get multiple weeks candle today and light it up for uh whole world.
Right. I mean, you could technically take 2 candles and, like stick them together. Like, you could technically do that, but that's awfully awkward and, it's not
It's about intention too, like it doesn't matter which candle or wicks you light in, it's the intention behind it.
sure, exactly. So, all right. So anyway, so hopefully that's helpful there. So,
Yeah.
all right. So yeah. So all right. I guess now you've got me. You've got a double shot of me here in my picture. But as long as you can survive that, then I think we'll be okay. Okay. So all right. So let's talk about. So we talked these last couple of times about saying yes for Shabbat. This is really about the nose of Shabbat, and by nose, I'm not referring to this. I mean, I'm referring to, like the thou shalt not, the things you're not supposed to do. Um, and the reason why, as you might imagine, the reason why I don't start with the thou shalt not is because um, when you hear all this is forbidden, that is forbidden, this is forbidden, that is forbidden, you may say to yourself, why would I partake in this? Right? What what's the benefit, right? What's so great about this? So so I want to talk about all the things that you can do for Shabbat. That's what I wanted to start with. And so now I do want to talk about things that we restrict on Shabbat, but that hopefully you'll see lead to the positives of Shabbat observance as well, right? I mean, I want for Shabbat to be a positive thing, in spite of the things that we don't do. So now, the other caveat I should give before getting into it is that there are certain things that in the conservative movement we have begun to allow that, let's say, numerous observant Orthodox Jews would still not do. And this is with full respect to our Orthodox brothers and sisters, that it's, certainly fine to, to maintain certain restrictions, but there are reasons why some of those restrictions, at least a couple of those restrictions in the conservative movement have been either relaxed or lifted, that there are specific reasons why that's the case. And a lot of it has to do with modern technology. But we'll get into that in a little bit. So maybe we should start with those things that I would say are pretty universal. One thing that you don't do on Shabbat, or that a Shabbat observant does not do, is spend money,
Well,
is, get involved in monetary transactions. Um, because that, understandably, is a fairly clear, it clearly goes against the idea of not working, right? I mean, if you're doing business, right? I mean, that's working, right? I mean, that's the idea. So the idea is to not spend money. I remember when I first began walking to and from synagogue when I was a teenager. I did not live particularly close to the synagogue I attended. I would literally walk an hour there and an hour back, uphill both ways. I'm not kidding about that, by the way. There was actually a hill at the end of, on one side of it, and then there was a hill on the other side of it. So I was going uphill at both occasions.
You
But
left out and in the snow.
and in the snow, well, I was in Denver, Colorado, so there was some snow here and there. Yeah. So fair enough. So I began to do that as I was beginning to explore my observance. And now, this being let's see, so in high school, it was the early, for me, was the early 1990s. My parents always said, okay, if you want to do that, we trust you to do that. The one thing we ask is carry a quarter in your pocket in case you need to use a payphone. A payphone, for those who want to know, it was something that I know a lot of you don't know what a payphone is, but they barely have them anymore. Obviously, this is before, cell phones became very common, certainly ones that could fit in your pocket, and all that. I remember, so that was one exception I would make. I remember actually saying that to somebody who observed in an Orthodox fashion, and her response was, I understand that. And if that's your parents' rule, you got to honor your parents, right? Honoring your parents is important. But she's like, my way of looking at it is an emergency is an emergency, right? I mean, if it's really an emergency, then not having a quarter is the least of your problems. Meaning you can, if it's an emergency, you knock on somebody's door and say, can I please use your phone? It's an emergency. Okay, fair enough. I mean, and again, this is I want to say this with full respect to people who observe otherwise. There's a joke that I enjoy. The joke is one person goes up to the next person at Shabbat morning services, and one person says, not that we're supposed to talk about business on Shabbat, but I'm thinking of selling my car. And the other person says, well, not that we're supposed to talk about business on Shabbat, but how much were you thinking of selling it for? Well, not that I'm supposed to talk about business on Shabbat, but I was thinking $5,000. The other person responds, well, not that we're supposed to talk about business on Shabbat, but I wouldn't pay more than $2,000 for that piece of trash. And, so they go back and forth in that same way. And then sort of, part ways a little bit. And then at Kiddush, right? At Kiddush, like after services, the second person comes up to the first person and says, well, not that we're supposed to talk about business on Shabbat, but I've thought about it, and maybe $5,000 would be okay. I think I'd like to buy your car. And the first person says, well, not that we're supposed to talk about business on Shabbat, but I sold it while the Torah was being read. Sorry, you're too late. So yeah, I mean, now it's it's a fanciful conversation, but it kind of illustrates this point that is it impossible to deal with matters of commerce is it possible to avoid dealing with matters of commerce on Shabbat? It's hard, but the idea is to try our best to avoid it because you're trying to separate from the everyday. Now, can this, does this sometimes mean that, can that potentially hamstring your ability to do business? Depending on what business you're in, it can, you know, it's, but I mean, there are, but I would say like many a Jewishly owned establishments will commonly be closed from Friday night until Saturday night, or maybe just they'll close 5 o'clock on a Friday and then just not open up on Saturday at all, and then be open again the next day or whatever it is. It's not, in areas of heavy Jewish population, it's fairly common. And I liken it to, there are some people there are people who particularly love this business, but they who get annoyed that Chick-fil-A is closed on Sundays. There's, some people who are fans of that, of the food from there, and they are annoyed, upset that it's open. Well, as you probably know from the lines that you see when you pass by, Chick-fil-A is doing just fine, and the fact that they're closed one day out of every week isn't really hurting them all that much. I mean, if they obviously have a business model that seems to work for them. So, is it always realistic to avoid business on Shabbat? It isn't, but again, it depends on what business you're in, right? It depends on what you do for work. And those can be challenges. I recognize that there are people, I mean, there are numerous times where I, talk to people who say, you know, I just can't, it is so hard to convince my employer to not give me a shift on a Friday night or a Saturday. It is
Can I have
so
a
hard.
question?
Yeah.
Okay. Then you said work. So I'm thinking work as, I don't know, this might sound corny, but for one, okay, there is physical world and spiritual world, right?
Right. Right.
So I look at work as like spiritual work, which mostly what I do in my concept. And there is also like physical world that we need to also work in here or there to, like survive or travel the world or all kind of things. So, um, so tongue, right? So what I say in spiritual world, I don't have much understanding about like how to explain things, but from what I understood until now, until like I'm 23 years old, I mostly do spiritual world with my tongue. That's what I understood from whatever.
Right.
And like I just wanna kind of understand, but how can I balance these two like worlds?
Right.
And I also want to be successful in physical life. And I also think maybe it's because of my psychological issues, because I do, like I said, uh, neyse, anyway, yeah, I'm not gonna talk about it. But yeah, you get what I say, I guess. Like, how can I balance the two worlds and be successful in the physical, let's say, realm?
Hmm.
Also, learn what I am doing in my spiritual work, like what is the benefit of what I'm doing to the other people, so I can motivate myself. Hey, like I'm doing spiritual work, so this is what it's doing. I'm doing something, but I don't know what I'm doing, spiritually talking. I also want to be successful in physical life too.
So let me try to respond in a couple different ways. At least, and hopefully I'm understanding, your question. So, in terms of like, so, so like by spiritual work, I mean, if you're thinking of like working on yourself, working on,
Well, if you ask me, like, what are you doing in spiritually? I'm saving the world. That's what I think I do. But also, I think if everybody, when they, you know, attend or give themselves into spiritual work, and like they really work, everybody is saving the world in a sense. So, but we will see. I think that I am the son of God, and like I'm here to, I am the Messiah that everybody is waiting, like,
right,
Christians, all the Jews and everybody, even in people who worship the Satan, like,
right. So, I mean, I guess the idea is that, so let me introduce this concept of that, like, there's there's about the idea of the spirit of Shabbat and what we mean
so
by that. The spirit
sorry,
of
but
Shabbat.
I'm gonna say one more thing. So from what I understood, Shabbat is just one day that we don't do work, spiritual work, right? We don't work
We
on
don't.
Shabbats.
Okay, no. I don't think that's not quite it. That's not quite it. Let me try to put it a different way.
Okay,
Okay, so
okay.
um, there's a letter of the law for Shabbat, and then there's the spirit of the law for Shabbat,
Mhm.
which is kind of an amorphous idea. But let me try to explain, what that is. Um, when we talk about when at least when I've talked about, does something uphold the spirit of Shabbat? Um,
Yeah.
I put it this way, right? If I'm uh, okay, let me talk about driving on Shabbat as an example, right? The conservative movement in sometime in the 1950s passed a rule saying that it is okay, if you must, to drive to and from synagogue for Shabbat services, which that idea flew in the face of so much of what Orthodox observance would teach, right? The Orthodox movement rejected this, idea completely. Okay. The idea is that if you are driving a car, you are breaking Shabbat in numerous ways, right? You're operating, you're operating a vehicle, you're turning on the ignition, I mean, like there are all these different things saying that, like, all right, you shouldn't be, operating a motor vehicle, is just you're doing that's too
Mhm.
many different types of things. When it comes to Um, but what the conservative movement, or at least the people who wrote this particular interpretation, what the conservative movement tried to explain was that most of us do not live within walking distance of the synagogue we attend. That was a result of suburbanization, right? That was a big thing that happened in, the 1940s, 1950s, the post World War II, is that there was this, the beginning of the suburban sprawl. And either people were moving a distance from the city center, or the synagogues were moving to the suburbs, and people who were still living in the city said, all right, what do we do now? Um, a strict interpretation would say you don't drive. You don't drive on Shabbat no matter what. You don't drive, and better to stay home and not drive than to drive and be at synagogue. Better that you not break the rules involved in operating a motor vehicle. And what the conservative movement came back and said was that we have to understand the reality of the situation. That there might be people who want to move walking distance to their synagogue, but they can't afford it, right? A lot of synagogues are in places where you don't exactly have affordable housing for everybody, right? Maybe some people can, but plenty of people can't. And then that also leaves out people who may be too infirm to walk. I mean, let's say you live, reasonably close, let's say you live half a mile away. Well, for some people, half a mile is not the easiest walk, right? It's just the reality of things, right? You're not able to do it. And let's say you're dealing with inclement weather, right? It's snowy, it's icy, it's pouring rain. Okay, does that mean everybody stays home? Well, if you look at strict interpretations, generally you'd say, yeah, it does. But what does that do to community? And what does that do to individuals who want to connect with community? And so what the conservative movement said was that's, if you need to drive, as long as you're driving to and from synagogue and you're not, doing other kinds of driving, okay. That's a relatively small price to pay in order to uphold community.
Listen, Rabbi.
Yeah.
The local Chabad doesn't do that, but the most Orthodox synagogues do that.
No. Well, okay. Well, it's interesting. Look, if you were to ask an Orthodox rabbi, they would answer, no, you don't drive. You don't. Now, there are some Orthodox rabbis who have taken, I think, sort of a slightly different tact, which is essentially, see no evil, hear no evil, if you will. Not that this is evil, but in other words, I don't want to know how you showed up. And by the way, it is not uncommon. I mean, I have numerous times seen people be dropped off 2 blocks away from their Orthodox synagogue, and they would walk those 2 last blocks so it would not appear to other people that they were driving. My feeling is, look, it's none of my business, how you observe. It's not my, I mean, that's, it's your life, but really? I mean, are you so worried about what people think of you? I mean, I guess some people are. Okay, again, not my business, not my place to judge. So there are plenty of Orthodox Jews, I would say, that do drive on, or at least Jews who attend Orthodox synagogues who drive to and from services on Shabbat.
You ask my question.
Real quick.
Okay, then go ahead. It's
No, it's
it's not
okay.
gonna be free.
No, it's okay. So, anyway, so that's and that's when we get into the spirit of Shabbat. In other words, what is upholding the spirit of Shabbat? Right?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, what always I found troubling
Mm-hmm.
before I decided not to be troubled
Mm-hmm.
was what's more work, to walk an hour uphill both ways in the snow,
Right.
or to drive.
Mhm.
And it seemed to me like driving was less work. So I found that very confusing before I decided not to be confused.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. And you know, look, I will say also, okay, when I went to rabbinical school, and I went to rabbinical school in Manhattan, right? Manhattan, where I mean, you know, New Yorkers are very, you know, people who live in Manhattan are very used to walking, you know, maybe not everywhere, but plenty of places. And also, pretty much everywhere you live in Manhattan, there's a synagogue in walking distance. So I remember that, you know, there would be some of my teachers at the Jewish Theological Seminary would say, "Oh yeah, we don't like that. We don't like that responsa from the conservative movement. We don't like that because you know, okay, maybe you can do, maybe technically it's allowed, but you really shouldn't." Would be what I mean. There would be people who tell me that, and I remember the reaction from a lot of my classmates was, "Easy for you to say. You live in Manhattan. We can't all be congregational rabbis in Manhattan. You know, we have to serve Jews around the country, around the world, potentially, right? Not every place is like Manhattan." And I once, and so, but when I was in rabbinical school, I was like, one of the rules was like, you will not drive to services on Shabbat, whether it's during the semester or not. You will not drive on Shabbat. If that happens, you will face disciplinary consequences potentially, right? And
The issue was subways, because nobody was driving in Manhattan, were they?
well, I don't know. I mean, but I think also, I mean, but some people were commuters.
Yeah.
You know, they were commuting from, you know, they were commuting from Rockland County, they were commuting from Long Island or New Jersey or what have you. So, you know, there may be opportunities to actually drive on Shabbat.
Oh,
Who
And
decides? Who decides which day is Shabbat?
who decides?
Yeah.
Well, you know, that's one thing where you know, I mean, the idea is that the sixth day, or sort of the seventh day, you know, we decide that was
Sunday?
that Saturday is, you know, Friday night to Saturday, that's the day. That was at the in other words, who decides? It was decided thousands of years ago.
So
Um,
first day in Turkey is Monday. The seventh day is Sunday.
Well,
So
so the way we look at it Jewishly is that the seventh day is Saturday. That
oh,
Saturday
that's
is the
better.
seventh day.
I like Saturdays better. Yeah.
Me too. Me too. No, absolutely. Look, I mean, you know, when I would take, you know, I remember taking the SATs, you know, the one of the standard tests for you know, to enter college. And, you know, as somebody who was, you know, Shabbat observant, and I would attend, you know, a Jewish school, we applied for and received exception, you know, and you know, a waiver so that we could take the SAT test on a Sunday, because SATs are almost always given on Saturdays. But we got, you know, but we were given special permission, you know, which, you know, I appreciate, right? And so, so whenever we took a standardized test in high school, the people who would be in the room would be Jews like us, and Seventh-day Adventists. Seventh-day Adventists, which is a relatively, I think, small Christian sect, in which their Sabbath is Saturday. So it was us and the Seventh-day Adventists. Um, so I guess, yeah, there is, you know, some modicum of disagreement, you know, in terms of when the Sabbath is. But I think, you know, just we've kept it, you know, we've kept that for thousands of years at the very least. That we, you know, we do Friday night to Saturday.
Well, Christians do it because that is part of their religion about resurrection and all that stuff.
Right.
So they still say
Resurrection?
that, you know, Saturday is the seventh day of the week, but they observe, I don't know if they call it the Sabbath night, but the day that they do their religious services is on the Sunday.
Yeah, and that's, that's okay. And I will say that there was a brief period of time where there were some Reform Jews in Germany. This was about 200 years ago, that experimented with moving the Jewish Sabbath to Sundays. I don't know if anybody knew this. There was this brief period where there was like, I don't know whether it was just one congregation or maybe just like one, group of congregations. These are Reform synagogues in Germany that said that they wanted to try to make Judaism as similar to Christianity as they could without crossing certain lines. And to them, it wasn't, crossing it so that you made the Sabbath on, a Sunday wasn't a line too far. So they tried that. It didn't stick, and I don't think any Jewish community has tried it since. But we're pretty much stuck on that.
Yes.
Well, it feels very foreign. I mean, it feels very foreign to us, certainly. I mean, that's there's no question. And yeah,
But they were saying the Sabbath was Sunday, or just, I mean, supposedly you're supposed to have services every day of the week, and they just
right.
weren't doing services on Sunday instead of Saturday. Are
They
they really?
they were basically saying the Sabbath is Sunday now.
How do they justify that?
I think they were trying to. I mean, so this was a response to, so it was part of the Enlightenment movement, especially in Germany, in the late 1800s, late
I understand
1700s.
why, but I don't understand how they could justify it.
Oh, I mean, I think that the feeling
They do
was,
whatever they want.
well, I mean, whatever they want, but I think also I feel like, and again, I'm not saying that this is, the right thing, but I think what they tried to sell was the idea that we need as Jews, to make our services and our ritual as similar to Christianity as we can, in order for it because there were so many Jews who were potentially leaving Judaism altogether. And they said that, okay, well, so for instance, let's have organ music in our services, right? To be similar to church. Let's have services in the vernacular, instead of like having so many, all the prayers in Hebrew, let's have a lot or most or what have you of the prayers in the language that we speak, for them was German. Let's, and so again, that experiment, again, this was not a widespread experiment. This was not.
You're pretty much describing Reform Judaism minus the Sunday part.
Well, right. I mean, Reform
Organs
Judaism
and in the vernacular, and
Reform Judaism has maintained, some of that, some
yeah,
of that.
it has.
They've
But
got much more conservative. But when I came back to the Army in 1979, what they were then, now they've gone closer to the conservative. And
Geliyorum birazdan hepsinin içinden geçeceğim,
prayer
sakin
book.
olun.
I bought a prayer book at like a sale at that Temple Bethel. Obviously not in the date of this, but the 1924 edition of the Union Prayer Book, which is the Reformed Prayer Book, and they don't even use the word rabbi or reader. It says minister.
right. It's it would not, one thing they would sometimes refer to the rabbi as reverend. Because what they said, it's like, reverend as in the one, we revere. Nobody should be revering me, like that's not what we should. But anyway, but like that was what, like again, they were trying to make things more palatable, I guess, or more similar to Christianity, so it felt more familiar. Again, I'm not saying this is right or wrong or anything like that. I'm just trying to put myself into the way they would try to sell this. to.
Why they think that Jews need to be similar to Christians?
Well, I think part of it was a response to modernity. It was a response to
I think it's about control.
there was a sense for okay. So again, if you can very quickly allow me to kind of delve into history a little bit here. The idea was that for so many centuries, especially, I mean, let's take Europe for example, right? For so many centuries, throughout the Middle Ages and then into, beyond that, Jews would be, literally barred from living in entire countries, right? They wouldn't be allowed. The anti-Semitism was extremely, extremely, harsh, and the Enlightenment began to forward these ideas of all men are created equal. What a concept, right? They began to talk about it like that, right? All men are created equal. And eventually even anti-Semites, well, maybe not anti-Semites, but to the typical European Christian would begin to say, oh, well, all men are created equal. I guess that means Jews too. Okay.
Yes.
And they began to, incorporate. So Jews began to be, I mean, it really was a major change with Jews beginning to be incorporated into greater society. Different Jews reacted to it in different ways.
Yeah.
For some Jews, hold on. For some Jews, they said, okay, well, if we've been incorporated into society, we should now feel free to be fully observant Jews and right, to be fully observant Jews, right? And be incorporated in broader society. Other Jews were more skeptical that welcoming would they were concerned that welcome would be short-lived, right?
They were scared.
And so what they did was they said, all right, well, let's make things as palatable as digestible to your typical European, and say, see, we're not that different from all of you. We're not so different, right? Okay, yes, we have different theology, but again, I mean, whether or not this, that you agree with the logic or whatever it is, that was part of the feeling about how Jews were going to be able to, maintain some sort of Jewish practice, Jewish identity, Jewish uniqueness in the face of, in these new realities.
Uh,
So
Jews.
Burke, if it's okay, I do want to get back to working, to Shabbat work, if it's okay,
Yeah.
if it's all right. All right, so we talked a little bit about the idea of driving and the idea of of not engaging in commerce. Another thing that we try to say is you don't cook on Shabbat. We don't actually cook. The idea is that the cooking that we do on Shabbat has to be done in advance. So on a Friday night, when it comes to eating a Friday night dinner, usually that's not too difficult, right? It's because, in other words, you stop cooking just before Friday night begins, and then you have your Shabbat, then you have Shabbat dinner, and you can usually have, hot food. Saturday becomes a little trickier in terms of having hot food, right? So on Saturdays, there is actually a very common Jewish food, and it's one of my favorite foods. It's called cholent. Cholent is a stew that cooks in a slow cooker. or on a very low flame if you don't have a crock pot or something like that. And the way that, so what people do is they basically throw in a bunch of ingredients, whether it's, usually it's, beans and potatoes. And if you eat meat, they'll throw in meat, and they'll throw in, sometimes they'll throw in like even a hard-boiled egg. They'll throw in, some, vegetables and things like that. They basically make, it's a stew. And, um, and the idea is that you put that into your crock pot, your slow cooker, whatever it is you're using, and before Shabbat begins, and then the next day, when you come back from synagogue at noon, 1 o'clock, whatever it is, you have a hot meal ready to go, right? You have a hot main course ready to go. And cholent is very filling. Usually, it's usually this is when we talk about the how great it is to take a nap on Shabbat. Usually, when you're eating after eating cholent, you have no choice but to take a nap because you can't move. It is just like it's incredible.
How do you spell that?
How you spell cholent?
Yeah.
Cholent.
Okay. Thank you.
Now there are ways to have other hot foods, right? There are ways to keep one's oven or stovetop on a very low setting throughout Shabbat, and and basically and cover it up for everybody's safety. And then the idea is that you can then take something that was in the refrigerator and put it on that relatively low heat so that at least it's warm when you want to have hot food on Saturday. The challenge with that is that I mean, like sometimes you have to be concerned about fire hazards or things like that. It depends on what you have in the home. But the idea of not cooking, you may say to yourself, well, wait a second, if you can't cook, well, why can you have warm food? How's that okay? Well, the idea is that it needs to be pre-cooked and then simply warmed up, but the cooking process should not continue. I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. Let's say you make a lasagna, right? Let's say you layer the noodles and the cheese and the sauce and the disgusting spinach or whatever you have. Okay, all right, sorry, that's my other thing. But yeah, no, actually, I don't mind spinach so much. Anyway, so you put you put it all, you layer it all up. If you were to say, okay, I'm not going to actually cook this casserole dish until Shabbat starts, that's not okay, right? You have to actually cook it. Like it has to be cooked, right? But then, all right, if you put it in if you put it back in the fridge, and then the next day you put it back into a preheated oven and warm it up, that's fine, as long as you're not the cooking process is not continued. Meaning, if you start seeing the cheese bubble up again, right? Now it's cooking. That's what you want to avoid.
Does the oven have to be on, have to have been on since before Shabbat? Or would you turn the oven on during Shabbat? It's like turning lights on.
So I want to talk. So electricity is a whole topic.
Like it's very hard for us to see the sanctuary. Our sanctuary is kind of dark for old people, especially my husband doesn't read Hebrew. He's taken many classes. He can't learn languages. I was his Russian tutor. We never would have met if he could learn languages. He just can't. So he reads the little red parts, the transliteration. It's very, very hard to see. It's very small and it's red. It's like a stupid color. So I found one of those travel lights, book lights, and we had it turned on ahead of time, and he brought it with him yesterday. But I didn't know if it would be okay to turn it on once we got there.
electricity is
Tricky, right?
it's a tricky thing
Yeah.
at least in modern conservative synagogues. So that's something that maybe that we'll touch upon next week, about how to address that. By the way, I mean, I understand your motivation. I understand, the desire to do it. Typically, a lot. Look, there are a lot of ovens. By the way, there are a lot of ovens these days that have like a Sabbath mode. I don't know if you've ever seriously, like it actually says like a Sabbath mode where you can program it to automatically shut off within a certain period of time.
But come on, I mean, that's,
Do you think that's cheating? I don't know.
yeah, I mean, if you really think that you shouldn't be lighting something, then, but it lights by itself, I mean, that's, yeah, it's.
Okay, because it's an interesting question because because listen, there are plenty of there are probably of Orthodox observant Jews
Oh, I
who
know.
will use timers on all their lights, right? They'll just be like, all right, we
Oh,
don't
yeah,
want
not
to.
my cousins. If it isn't on before
My aunt
7,
did
it doesn't
that.
go on. If
Right,
they forget to
right.
turn it on, it just does. I
Mine
mean,
too.
I had friends who made Aliyah, but they used to live in Livingston. And then they were modern Orthodox. They had a cooler for water, like hot and cold. But their daughter, who was even more observant and who made Aliyah before them, wouldn't use that because something in there was heating the hot water. So she wouldn't turn the knob because, it gets a little, it's like, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I'm just saying it's tricky.
So this is why I feel like, and again, so let's go back to this idea of the spirit of Shabbat, right? The spirit of Shabbat might, you could, and look, and I recognize this is a very gray area, what I'm saying with the spirit of Shabbat. The spirit of Shabbat would indicate that, where again, where you look at that, where one looks at that and says, come on, seriously, what like, are you really doing work by, you know, pressing on a knob on a little thing, that a little spigot that, lets you get like hot, water? Like, are you really, is that really? And I think for some people, the answer is, come on, that's a bridge too far. There are others who say, and I'm not trying to, defend one way or the other, right? I'm just trying to say, like, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of those who do, and at least try to understand whether, this, again, I'm not trying to convince you of this necessarily, but it's just that your part of it, of the spirit of Shabbat, I would say, can be interpreted as we do what's different from the everyday, right? We do what's different. And there's the thought that if we do what we do the rest of the other 6 days of the week, that's not in the spirit of Shabbat. So even though it might feel silly, right? Again, I'm not trying to convince you of this, but even though it might feel silly or what have you, it's like we are not doing anything that would trigger any kind of work by anything or anyone. Okay. So that leaves out, I guess, to maybe, put a bow on this for today, I want to, mention a joke. The joke is that a man goes up to the rabbi and says, Rabbi, I wish I could come to Kol Nidre services, the services that start Yom Kippur. I wish I could come to Kol Nidre services, but my Yankees are in the playoffs, and the game is that night, right? What do I do, Rabbi? And the rabbi says, it's no problem. It's no problem. That's why that's why God created DVRs, right? You can, that's why God created DVRs. And the man says, Rabbi, that's brilliant. So I can DVR Kol Nidre services? Fantastic. Great.
It was like Hank Greenberg wouldn't play with a Yom Kippur or something.
Rosh Hashanah.
Or Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah, yeah. Sandy Koufax wouldn't play on Yom Kippur. Yeah.
Pearl refused to.
Bruce Pearl, when he was coaching, wouldn't. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, Joe Lieberman, Shabbat observance. Although he would make interesting exceptions. He would make some, but okay, but so the reason why I brought that up is, because I think next week it probably makes sense to talk about electricity, and because I think with electricity it's a little more mixed in terms of, is it okay? Is it not okay? And what are the implications of it potentially being okay to use on Shabbat? Because, and then if it is okay, how does that impact the spirit of Shabbat? So that's what I want to that's what I want to talk about next time. Is to go into that, because I think that is one of the trickier things about, what are we saying no to and why. So I appreciate the questions, and look, tangents are good. Tangents are good, and thank you for thank you for being okay with tangents. I did want to hope you understand. I wanted to make sure to get back to the overall topic, so hopefully that's okay. But I guess what I want to leave you with at the moment, at least to maybe get to really put a bow on this, is that, again, the things that we're not allowed to do on Shabbat can lead you to saying yes to other things. By not being allowed to cook on Shabbat, we don't have the pressure of having to cook on Shabbat. Right? And look, you might, I know, and maybe you love to cook, and it's a catharsis or what have you. And I'm not saying, but there's no pressure that you have to, right? Is the idea. Same thing with, dealing with business, right? It can be potentially challenging to not deal with your business or deal with your work for 24 hours, but it can be liberating to be like, I don't have to think about it. I don't have to worry about it. I can concern myself with other things. So that's where, again, we don't want to be overwhelmed with all the things we have to say no to, but it can lead to a lot of good yeses. Sounds all right?
Thank you.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
All
Rob.
right. Thank you much. I will see you. I'll be with you next Sunday.
Okay,
you, Rabbi.
I'll see you Tuesday.
Yep. We got plenty of
See you Tuesday.
holidays left to go.
Wednesday.
Love
Yep.
the week. There
Yeah.
you
All right. Okay. Bye.
Is there anything we need to talk about Ann Manis, or is there anything that we have to talk about at this point?
I have not heard anything yet.
Since this will be on YouTube, why don't we, if we could take this on offline?
Yeah.
We'll
Well,
still be here.
no, but all of this is on YouTube. So